Hi, welcome to the Mental Wellness Journey. Honor the authentic you. I am beyond excited to have Dr. Christina Bjorndal interview with us today. She's an authority in the treatment of mental illness such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorders, and eating disorders. Having overcome many mental health challenges, Dr. Chris is a gifted speaker and writer who loves to share her philosophy of wellness in interviews with icons such as Jenny McCarthy and many others. She is recognized as one of the top naturopathic doctors to follow by two independent organizations. She has helped many patients, she's helped many patients achieve physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. She has completed 3 books about mental health, as well as has a 10-week course and in-person retreat on mental illness. And visit her at drchristinabjorndal.com. So, Dr. Chris, thank you so much for being here today. And I always love talking with you. And as I shared earlier, I really love your Facebook posts. They just hit me as so compassionate and feeling and thoughtful. And it's a necessary voice, and it's wonderful to read them. But
Thank you.
yeah, but you have a lot to share. So,
Yeah.
where should we start?
I think it's just helpful for people to know that I haven't always been a naturopathic doctor, and it's really through my own journey of finding solutions to the mental health challenges that I faced that I ended up becoming one. So for me, I have had the book I've written is called Beyond the Label,
Which
and that's
title? I love the title. I knew I would like you when I heard the title.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's because we often get given all these labels, and then we feel like that we are defined by that. And I really wanted people to understand that you can move, through that and beyond that to this place of wellness. So for me, things started in eating. It started with an eating disorder in high school, and and I just have to highlight that prior to that, there's a couple of key things. Number one, I'm actually adopted. And so one of my teachers that we were talking about before we started recording is Dr. Gabor Mate. He starts one of his, or he starts or talks about in one of his books about how the mental emotional environment when you're in utero can affect you and set you up often for predispositions in mental health. And I know for myself that was the case. So I came into the world wired to,
Right.
a certain way. But I want people to understand that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And that's because of, primarily because of this idea of neuroplasticity, that your brain isn't a fixed lump of cement, right? You can create new neural pathways and learn to think a different way. The other key that happened as well is in
Love
the
to
year.
interrupt
Yeah, go ahead.
that key of you can create new neural pathways in the way you're thinking. And
Yeah.
that is huge. And that's one reason that I know the value of psychotherapy and have seen so many people feel so much better when they have a relationship like that and are able to work on establishing the different thought patterns.
Yeah.
That's one way to change that, but that's huge.
Yeah, it's so big, and it's interesting for me, like my journey into wellness, it started on that physical level with putting in the right pillars to support me in forming neurotransmitters.
Mhm.
And, but, I still was struggling. Like I was better for sure, but I still was bumping up against myself. And what I mean by that, I was bumping up against my inner critic, against these core beliefs. And there's also things like limiting beliefs that we have and shadow beliefs or unconscious commitments. And those are at play often whenever you say you want something, but then you never do it.
Mhm.
And it's because you've got some messaging at some point that is in conflict with what it is you say you actually want. So I had to work through all of that. in order to kind of to get to this place of healing that I am now. And so it's been a long journey to get here, but I am, you know, I'm here. I've arrived. Hopefully, um, my. But I think, you know, it's through all of these pieces that I talk about, like the 10 steps that I discussed, that we have to look at it all, because you are a multifactorial person, and we're complex beings, and it's not just about, you know, one thing. There isn't one pill to fix your ill.
Right.
And that dogma, or that messaging that we've been led to believe, is not, I think, the right messaging. And again, I'm not saying not to take the pill for your ill, but I'm just saying that,
Right.
you know,
It's not
over time, yeah, we got to look at, why are you taking it, right?
right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other kind of interesting piece that's more popular now in these last 5 to 10 years is this concept of the gut-brain relationship.
Mhm.
And really interesting for me, in the year prior to developing the eating disorder, I did antibiotics for quite some time to treat acne.
Oh, there it is.
And so that disrupts your gut flora. And so for me, there's lots of research, especially with eating disorders, around the connection of the microbiome and the development of eating disorders. So that's another really important piece. And the reason I mention it is just to highlight the importance of taking your history and looking through your history. So even though your depression or anxiety or OCD or whatever may have started in the last 3 years, it's what was happening in the 15 years prior to that,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
It's all important,
And
right?
psychologists and psychotherapists look at it, um, the relational piece, but also, you know, functional medicine doctors and naturopathic physicians really, really understand that overlay of the physical, with the gut-brain axis. And it's not something at all that was in my traditional world, that, you know, doctors in the US don't think what you eat matters, but we know there's no two ways about it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So then for me, I think also because of the adoption, I had developed some beliefs. So one of the beliefs was that I'm not worthy, I wasn't wanted, I'm not good enough. So the way I compensated it in the world, to sort of make up for those beliefs, was I was an overachiever. And so I'm, as my son likes to point out, I was that try hard kid, right? Like I was the one that was, getting the straight A, top this, top that, you name it. And by the time I got to my third year of university, that served me very well. However, I came to a point where you can only burn the candle at both ends before you run out of a candle to burn. And that's what happened to me. I ended up in this place where I'd never been before, which was paralyzed with anxiety and debilitated with depression. So I ended up starting a tricyclic antidepressant. And within a few months after that, I was in another place I'd never been before, which was not sleeping, having rapid speech, very grandiose, very, I ended up having, basically ended up spiraling out of control into a delusional, psychotic, manic episode, which at that time was very scary because I didn't know what was happening to me. And it took 6 people to, yeah, wrestle me into a straitjacket, and off I went to the hospital. And so then I was told I had bipolar disorder type 1, and I started medication for that and ended up graduating. And for that next decade, I was pretty much I was depressed for most of that time. And I had a great job. But again, that overachieving piece was always kicking in, driven by this inner critic that was constantly telling me that I wasn't good enough. I ended up having a suicide attempt that left me in a coma with kidney failure. And I was on dialysis and told I would need a kidney transplant. And when I came out of that coma, I can tell you that I certainly wasn't a happy camper. I really was not, because remember, I'm an overachiever. So I was not impressed that I did not succeed. And I know that I shouldn't make light of suicide, but I feel
Sometimes
like,
it's okay in a
you
country.
know, yeah. So anyway, I wasn't impressed. I was still depressed. And my friend gave me a book to read. And there was a quote in this book by Marianne Williamson. The book is called A Return to Love. And the quote was on surrender. And it goes along these lines, that surrender is not about breaking out of anything. It's a gentle melting into who you really are.
Mhm.
So you let down your armor and you discover that all God needs is just one sincere, surrendered moment where love matters more than anything and nothing else matters at all.
It's so beautiful and so well expressed.
Well, the key word in that phrase for me was love. I realized that, I mean, I didn't realize it up until that point, that obviously I didn't love and accept myself. And what I had done with that diagnosis of bipolar disorder was I had shoved that as far away from me as humanly possible, right? And that is not happening to me. Thank you very much. And I was wearing this mask all the time that, you know what, I'm okay. I've got it all together. And really I didn't. And I wasn't accepting of the bipolar piece, right? I hated it.
And when you say inner critic, do you mean, I'm pretty sure I know what you mean, but it's
It's
sort of your subconscious talking to you.
Yeah, it's that voice in your head that's saying to you, "Oh, oh, you're stupid," or "Oh, why did you do that?" or "You're not good." Like, it's just this little voice that's
When
it's
you're
not a it's not a psychotic thing. It's just it's just a voice.
no, but it's sort of in the unconscious, or it's a dialogue that I've had with myself. Thoughts usually lying in bed, going over the day, thinking of all the things that I did wrong or what I said wrong.
Right? Yeah, that for sure. Yeah, most people have an inner critic that has the stage, and what we need to do is bring some compassion to it and understanding, but also lift up the voice of the inner cheerleader or champion or coach or
I love that.
something. Yeah, and so basically, that's been my quest since um, regaining consciousness after that suicide attempt, to figure out how to love and accept myself. And that's the journey I've been on, and it's brought me to this place. And I feel now, like, a question a lot of people ask me is, well, are you healed, and or are you cured? And I think that healing is a journey. It's an ongoing process. I don't think it's a destination. I think that I will be, I think it's important to work on your health until the day you take your last breath, right? So I haven't had a psychotic event. I've had 6 in 33 years. The last one was 2008. So it's been 12 years now. So I feel like I'm over that, you
That's
know?
wonderful.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's thinking, well, how did you do that? And I know
Yeah.
it's not as, if you could do it in one line, it would be great, but that's why we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
classically trained, like, oh, if you have bipolar 1, it's for your entire life, and you have to be on medicine and, get with the program. But
Yeah.
as a psychiatrist, that was never me, because how can you
Yeah.
say that for anything, for
Yeah.
anybody in the world, let alone when they're younger. So
Yeah. Yeah. The last chapter of my book is the myths of mental illness. I've thought about breaking it out into like a book on its own, but all those myths are things that were said to me at one point, like you'll have to take medication for the rest of your life, or you should never have children, or it's genetic and you can pass it on, or
that's why they
um,
shouldn't have children.
pardon?
That's why they told you you shouldn't have children.
Yeah. because
And
this is such a horrible thing, and why would we want to pass that on to anybody else?
it's like they're telling you you're horrible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting though, Laurie, I didn't come out about bipolar actually until I wrote my book, and so it's been a couple of years now. I mean, some people knew, obviously. I mean, it's pretty hard to hide sometimes if you're around somebody when they're having a psychotic event. But I tried to keep it private. I was really private about my health, and that's also because my psychiatrist told me not to tell anybody that this was something that is misunderstood. And because I used to be in the corporate world and I had a corporate job, he was very protective of me. He didn't want
Mhm.
my job to be in jeopardy because I handled large sums of money, and sometimes with mania there's a spending thing. And
Right.
yeah, so I understand why he said it, but it left that impression that this is something bad. This is something, there's something deeply wrong with me, right? And it also fed that belief that I'm not lovable, right?
Just fueled it.
Right? Yeah, yeah. So, um,
It's the universe making sure you get the message.
yeah,
That's your journey, is proving that you're not, I think.
that's right.
Not
And
trying to
you,
be
you, you
armchair.
know, yeah, you're so right, because it was interesting. I think that I've reflected a lot on why that suicide attempt didn't work when it should have. And this might be a bit out there for listeners, but I feel that we all, before we inhabit the body, we make a contract perhaps with God or the universe or whatever word floats your boat, depending on your spiritual or religious background. And then we forget that we've made this contract, and then we live our life and we wonder, why are we having all these struggles that we're having? So I feel like one of my soul contracts is to learn how to love and accept myself. That if I was to succumb to suicide in this lifetime, that I have not learned that lesson. Because somebody who's struggling, I think, with suicide, ultimately they're at war with themselves, and right, they're not at peace. And then on top of that, I feel that I've contracted this tough illness to love and accept. So, um, so it's just a different perspective, and people can take it or leave it. But I think that I always think about what's my reason for being here on a soul level, on a spiritual level, right? So
Right.
yeah,
As I shared with you and other speakers on this program, is, one of my um, intentions for this program is to destigmatize I like to call it mental wellness, because
yeah,
the most educated, enlightened people will I have to see a psychiatrist, or I didn't really have depression. It's like, let's get real. Most people experience anxiety.
mhm,
A lot of people experience depression. It's a part of being a human being. Why, you don't stigmatize me because I wear glasses.
right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I usually say is, the full range of human experience is from the pit of depression or suicide all the way through to psychosis, right? That's the full range of human experience. But the reality is, not everybody's comfortable with those extremes.
Mhm.
And having lived in both of those extremes, I can tell you that it's not fun always to be there, but to call it abnormal, I
Yes.
think, right, does it a disservice for sure. And I think too, we really want to understand that each and every person that has depression or anxiety or whatever, the the way they got there is their own journey.
Mhm.
So the way I experience depression or you experience depression or anxiety, we really want to understand how you got to where you are. And that's the beauty of functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, because we're treating you as an individual, right? It's not that so therefore the root cause may be different for you than it was for me. And we want to be looking at, well, what are the various roots of these mental challenges that people go through? And they can, there's many, I talk about 10 areas to look at in my book. And but just, people need to understand that it's not always just neurotransmitter based.
Yeah.
It's, it can be hormone related.
Mhm.
And when I talked about in university how I ran out of gas, well, that I didn't know anything about the adrenal system at that time, or cortisol, or burnout, and that's really what I think was going on then. But
Driving yourself.
yeah, right. So, but that conversation, that wasn't happening. So it's important, especially when, or another classic example is women at menopause. At times women notice shifts in their mood and sometimes can experience depression or anxiety, and they get prescribed Prozac. Well, it's a hormone imbalance usually, right? So you're using the wrong tool for the job, right? Maybe you're using a hammer, but you need a wrench.
Yep.
Yeah. So I find that is really a differentiation that you're going to get when you work with.
Yeah, when you work with Dr. Chris, because she's looking at all of the different aspects.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did
Yeah.
you naturopathic medicine then?
Yeah. So what happened was I was taking 5 psychotropic medications at one point to manage my condition. And I had a friend, same friend that gave me that book. She's a nutritionist, and she was always encouraging me to look to see a naturopathic doctor. So I actually had made an appointment to see one prior to that suicide attempt, but his wait was 2 years at that time. So anyway, I went to see him when I got better, and I worked with him, and then I worked also with a nutritionally oriented psychiatrist named Dr. Abraham Hoffer.
Oh, okay. I forgot that.
Yeah,
I don't know how I forgot.
yeah. So he's quite well renowned in Canada, and worked with Linus Pauling, who has won 2 Nobel Peace Prizes for his work. Well, some of his work on vitamin C. But anyways, Dr. Hoffer and Dr. Chan, the 2 clinicians I worked with, they put me on a nutritional protocol, but mostly supplement based. And that I carried that along with all the medication. I really want people to understand that you have to work with somebody if you're going to be making any kind of transitions, and you want to carry both of them along. You want to build in the nutritional piece first. I then had a year where I felt for the first time free of depression and anxiety, which
Wow.
I hadn't felt that in the 15 years prior.
Wow.
And so then I knew, okay, there's something to this.
And that is also one of my messages is it doesn't matter what it takes to get you feeling there. Obviously a big believer with know how important nutrition is and the gut brain connection.
Access, yeah.
But medicine can be a necessary tool at times, and there's nothing bad about it. There's nothing inherently bad. And I just want that message to come across too. And
Yeah.
you were, depression and anxiety free for the first time in 15 years. That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how you got used to your new life.
Yeah, right. I was like, well, it's very uncomfortable because I'm not used to being in this place, right? And also, you know, well, so the other piece for me was I had a stressful job, and I really wasn't like I was happier, like I wasn't depressed and anxious, but I still wasn't happy in terms of the career piece. And so I started well, I was always been a journaler, and so I started reflecting on my life. And there was a life coach named Cheryl Richardson. She was on Oprah at one point, and she asked posed the question, if money didn't matter, what would you be doing with your life? And so I journaled about that and reflected and sat with myself, and the answer that always kept coming up was to go back to school and to study to be or like an orthomolecular psychiatrist like Dr. Hoffer, or a naturopathic doctor. And so at first um, the second thought after that was like, you can't quit your job. What do you know, are you crazy? Like, what do you
Yeah.
can't go back to school. And but I didn't listen to that voice. I ended up making a career change at 33, and I went back to high school. I had to go back because I didn't do the sciences the first time through. And then, and then I went to naturopathic school because medical school, I just didn't think that the sleepless nights would be
Yeah,
conducive to supporting my mental health. So,
I think that was a wise choice for a lot of reasons. And as I shared with you before, like, um, I went to college before the internet, so it was not
mm,
my radar and know that something like this existed. And I always wonder if I did, would I have gone to naturopathic school?
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but also, like, here you are trying to achieve because you have that inner critic. And it sounds like if you're in the corporate world, here you've got to hide yourself because, which only reinforces the inner critic.
That's right.
The psychiatrist said, don't tell
Yep.
work, which, again, in an effort to protect your job, but still, so that must have been pretty awful when you can't be yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
So at that point, you have two different, I'm going to say two halves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really was really good at presenting this person that had it all together.
Mhm.
And not very many people knew that I suffered with anxiety or depression for that matter. And so most people were very shocked when when I had that suicide attempt. Um, so I was diagnosed in a time when, this is back in 1987. So this is a time when there was no conversation going on about mental health. And so I'm really happy to see the shift in the discussion about it and the awareness about it. But I really still think we have to move from that to action. So what are we actually doing to help people? Right? There's still people are suffering. I mean, the rates of anxiety and depression and mental health and suicide are higher than they've ever been.
And I think a piece comes from what we shared a little bit before this started is what you're presenting to the world and who you are inside.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't gel,
Yeah.
you know, and, to get through medical school and residency, I put on a bit of a persona that unfortunately didn't have to. But I remember when choosing residency, um, I was able to choose something that I know I could, I'm going to say tolerate or do, um, because I couldn't keep up. That
Mm.
persona,
Mm-hmm.
be that hard driving, cut off your emotions. And I'm like, but I went into medicine because I wanted to help people and I wanted to have those emotions and a connection with people. And, you know, if you have to be a surgeon or an internist or an OBGYN, all my examples were being cut off from that.
Yeah. 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 It's a tough dance between the ego and the soul. And there's there's a little exercise that I take people through that we could do if we want, just about learning how to sort of tap in and trust your intuition, this inner voice that's got your back, but we don't always listen to it because the voice of the ego drowns it out. Like even for me, right, that voice within rose up and said, go back to school. And then immediately the voice of fear that comes from the ego rises up and tells you all the reasons why you can't do that. Right.
Right.
And I feel like, well, there's one article that I wrote, and I think it's in my book, where I talk about one of the levels of depression, where I feel like it's sometimes a bit of a battle between the soul and the ego. It's like your heart wants to move east, and your ego wants to move west, and it's like you get stuck and
Mm-hmm.
you don't know which one to listen to, and then you become paralyzed in depression, and it's almost like you contract in and you can't make a move because you don't know which move to make.
Right. And I think, and that's part of why we're doing this series, because I think some people at certain points don't even realize there's that.
Yes.
Is that what you were talking about with your exercise? How to tune into that?
Yeah. Do you want to try it?
Yeah,
Did we do it? I don't know if we did that before, but that's okay. We can try it. It's, are you okay to be a guinea pig?
of course.
Okay. Okay. So it's pretty easy. We'll just have a little conversation with your heart. But just to start, I'll ask you just to connect with your heart. Maybe put your hands over your heart and just breathe in. So we'll just take a deep breath in together. And then I'm going to make a statement and just repeat it, and then the answer that comes. So the first one is, heart, show me where you are.
Heart, show me where you are.
And then just notice if you notice a color or a word comes or a sensation.
Kind of heart beating faster.
You can feel your heart connecting. Okay, great. So, heart, will you ever lie to me? Yes or no?
Will you ever lie? Oh, heart, will you ever lie to me? No.
No. Heart, have I always followed you? Yes or no?
Heart, have I always followed you? No.
Heart, how do you feel when you hear, I haven't always followed you?
Heart, how do you feel when you heard, I don't always follow you? Sadness.
Sadness. Why do you feel sad, heart?
Why do you feel sad, heart? Because you're not seeing me.
You're not
Or,
seeing me.
yeah, and which is you.
Yes.
You're not seeing you, which is me.
Right. Yeah. Heart, is it possible that you are God or grace or my intuition dwelling within? Yes or no?
Heart, is it possible that you are God or grace dwelling within? Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. That's it.
Bright yellow. When I say
Okay.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the quote that I want people to think about. The heart must usher the mind into the zone of revelation, by Joseph Campbell. So we're wanting to lead our lives from this heart-centered place and then use the mind to figure out all the to-dos around it. Most people are doing it the other way around. They're
Yeah.
using their mind to lead, and it's just the reason it's why I like to teach this and highlight it is your heart is always trying to talk to you, and this is this inner guide, so to speak, and we all have one, but we don't always listen to it. And so the way you can build your strength and your listening skills around it is to start with asking your heart just some really small questions like brown rice or quinoa tonight, right? Chicken or beef, right? Blue pants or brown pants. Like nothing is going to happen if you
There's
don't
no
make,
wrong answer.
there's no wrong answer, but you want to get used to trusting
Right.
the answer that comes. Because here's the thing, then you'll get the hit. Like when you get the hit, call your mother, check in on Susie,
Oh, yeah.
right? Then you'll do it. It's so powerful when you learn to work with this inner I'll call it your intuition. Yeah. So
I
that's
love
been a
I love that your heart, because to me that's
yeah.
what
Actually, here's another quote that you'll probably like by Joseph Campbell, which is, the psychotic drowns in the same water the mystic swims.
wow.
Yeah. So we drown people in medication, and yet on the same side, perhaps, of somebody who's psychotic is they could be considered a mystic. But we celebrate mystics in our culture. We don't celebrate people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
I know.
So yeah.
Don't see it as human. That bipolar in room 3 or that schizophrenic. I'm like, my back. I don't know if my back bristles, if that's the right phrase, but gotta see the you. And
Mm-hmm.
the first, and the you isn't going to be seen until the person sees
That's
themselves.
right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there was just this other piece that we were talking about earlier too, which is also coming from Gabor Mate's work, where he talks about, he says, virtually everything that's wrong with you began as a compensation or a survival mechanism in childhood. So he feels that
Ex-
that yeah,
Explain who he is, because I think
yeah, people may not know him. Yeah, Dr. Gabor Mate, he's a Canadian medical doctor, worked a lot in addiction and mental health, and he has 3 books: Scattered Minds, which is about ADHD, which he has, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction, and he's quite open about,
Hungry Ghost, is that what you said?
yeah, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, yeah, Close Encounters with Addiction. And the 3rd book is a really great one called When the Body Says No.
Mm.
Yeah. And he's working on a 4th book, which is called The Myths of, it's actually similar to what I was mentioning earlier about the myths of mental illness. I think his working title is The Myths of Mental Illness, something about insanity, finding sanity in an insane culture.
That's a great perspective, because I do agree we have an insane culture.
Yeah.
It's, if nobody can see it now, just in the US, how divided we are and not to each other. And, you know, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So
he's not
people
just,
could, sorry, go ahead.
he's not just a biological psychiatrist then.
No, and he's not even a psychiatrist. He's just a medical doctor. Yeah. But he's,
Because he didn't get filled with goofy theories. I'm talking down about psychiatrists. I shouldn't do that. Sorry. I'm thinking I am one, so I guess I have the right to say it. But anyway.
well, he's developed an approach called compassionate inquiry. So, and it's like a psychotherapeutic approach of working with the body and the emotions, along with the beliefs that we develop. So, his whole thing is with trauma. It's not about the event that's happened to you. It's what has happened inside of you as a result of that event. So what you've made that mean, or the way that you shut yourself off, or the emotions that you suppressed because you had to, for whatever reason, in your experience. And I was had the pleasure of talking to him, and he was asking me. He said to me, because I told him about, the diagnoses I've had, and he said to me, "So Chris, what emotion did you suppress?" Because to him, depression is something that you've pushed down, you've depressed something within you. So what emotion did you not express? And so for people who are listening, I think it's important, most likely, to work with somebody who can help you navigate this. He brought up anger for me.
Mm.
And at first I was like, I didn't really resonate. I don't normally resonate with anger.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one experience when I was 16 with anger, and then for the most part, I've not had a very good relationship with it. I don't consider myself an angry person. But through this training that I've been doing with him in this course, what came out of the inquiry into my body was actually some anger towards my biological mother and actually her parents for not supporting my pregnancy.
Wow.
Not right. And so it was really powerful. And so he talks a lot. I mentioned this earlier already in our conversation, that he talks about that emotional imprinting that can happen in utero, right? But not only in utero, in childhood, right?
Yeah.
So these experiences we have are important. So I just want people who are listening to understand that what he says is that all diagnoses, whether it's ADD, ODD, depression, anxiety, psychosis, whatever it is, it began as a coping mechanism. At some point, there's something about them that served as some survival value, right? And what you and I were talking about was there, and what he teaches is that when you're little, that as a baby, as young children, we have 2 needs primarily. One is for attachment to our caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is to be authentic. And often what happens is we have to sacrifice our authenticity in order to maintain the attachment, because our survival is the key,
And yeah,
right? So, if you think of somebody who's being abused, like a child who might be beaten by their caregiver,
yeah,
right? That's their attachment though, right? So they suppress their emotions and really who they are, because they have to maintain that attachment, even though the attachment's messed up,
right.
right? Anyway, I'm probably going on a tangent, but I just find it really interesting.
No, I love, that's why I wanted to speak with you, because
Yeah,
people need to hear that. I
yeah,
am so with you there. And and it's being compassionate with yourself and acknowledging the you, the heart,
yeah,
the
yeah,
soul.
yeah,
When you don't, a lot of not good things happen.
yeah. Well, and then what happens is you end up developing these beliefs,
Right.
right? And then that becomes the operating system. That's the operating system in the computer up here,
Yeah.
right? And then that's what runs your life, right?
And it's adaptive.
Totally.
That's, you got you a successful job in corporate, I was going to say corporate America. You are in America too. Like, I'm sorry, I hate when the US calls themselves America. But anyway, um, it was adaptive
Yeah.
for a while. But I guess your body was saying no at that time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Like I feel like I have more energy and more vitality and better health at 53 than I did at 23. Right? So I think there's definitely something to be, well, there's a lot to be said for, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, proper nutrition, sleep base, like let's not forget the basics, right? Diet, sleep, exercise, managing stress. I mean, those are the first four things I talk about in, of the 10 steps. So these things, that can take you really far, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, so anyways, I just think that there's so many people that are struggling. Not many people hear a positive message around healing bipolar disorder. um, Not way too many people are at war with themselves, and I just hope that through the work that you're doing and through the work that I'm doing, that we can help sort of spread a positive message out there.
Yes. How do you work with people now?
So mostly because I'm in Canada, we have different regulations that we have to consider.
Overregulated, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So
It's just US people on this. So
right,
surprised me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can work with people one on one. But they have to come to Alberta,
Mhm.
or to Edmonton, where I live. I created the online course. That's one of the reasons I created the online program, is so that people can have access to the teachings that I like to teach if I see you over time, one on one. And so there's that's available for people, and then there's the books, of course, that are there too. So, but I usually just encourage people to find somebody local,
Mhm.
and whether it's again naturopathic doctor, a great counselor. I'm really interested in, I find this compassionate inquiry technique has been very helpful for me. I mean, somatic experiencing is also beneficial. So I think, like you said, it doesn't, do you have to find something, and hopefully, that takes you to
Mhm.
a place of well-being, and if it or gets you some improvement, and then you can look into something else. I mean, there's so many
Yes.
avenues, right? Just get started.
Right. And I like how your book and your online course summarizes everything, because that's a huge step. So you can even begin to see yourself in that realm.
Yeah, yeah,
And it gives you more language so you know what to look for.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so I forgot, I didn't ask you at the beginning. Do you have sometimes our speakers have a free gift available?
yeah, sure, I
Oh,
can.
then we'll make sure everybody gets the link, that it's available in the email.
Yeah, You know what? I was thinking, well, I think what might be the best one might be the forgiveness meditation, because I think that that's a big step in healing as well. That is not, people don't always dive into that. So I think that's the one I'll send you, is the forgiveness meditation. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again, Dr. Chris. I really, really appreciate you being here. And I just always love talking with you.
Thanks, Laurie. Thanks so much. Bye.